Okay, Rik, thank you for taking the time. Aside from doing media where you talk about yourself and answering the same questions over and over again, good day for you so far?
Yeah. Although you're my first today, so it's a relaxing day. I've only got three or four, and yeah, I'm grooving.
Well, congrats on this new book, yet it's also a soundtrack. Is there an easy way to call what it is, given the fact that it's got the multiple kind of tiers to what it is?
Well, the subtitle's pretty good. It says liner notes for a guitar and its music, which is that's essentially what it is. I designed a guitar. I was writing a bunch of tunes. I recorded it. I said to my editor at ECW Press, who's also a guitar player, by the way,
Hmm.
uh, hey, I'm thinking that the liner notes could expand out. I might even be able to turn it into a whole book. And he went, awesome. Can people hear the hands rubbing?
Yeah, yeah, they can hear it, they can see it. And the key is not only your first book, I'm sorry, not your first book with ECW Press. So did you know when you were writing the first one that you wanted to do a second book? The reason I ask is most people don't realize how much work writing a book is.
No, I know that, but I mean, I've had a life of writing. Writing songs, writing columns for guitar magazines. You
Sure.
know, I'm a writer. At the bottom of everything, I'm a writer. So uh, when I was sort of retired from the road, and I'm going, what am I going to do in my, in my golden years? I wanted to write poetry. That was one of the things because I wanted the idea of being able to write something where I could escape the boundaries of having to rhyme and having to fit song structures. And I wanted something where I could be more expansive and push at the envelope a little bit more as a writer.
Hmm.
So, but who wants to publish poetry books? You can't make any money, right? Like it's as small as trying to make jazz records, which that's another thing I wanted to do in my golden years. So, anyways, I'd written a book of poetry, and I realized that a publisher wouldn't be interested unless I dangled a golden carrot of, well, I'll also give you a memoir.
Right.
So ECW Press, Michael Holmes, they went, what? A book of poetry and a memoir? Great, we'll give you a two-book deal. So I fulfilled those two things. And then I was writing another book of poetry, was on the way. And I thought, I'm going to have to do something else. And so the guitar thing, the 10 Telecaster sales was going. And I went, so can I have another two-book deal if I give you, what if I give you something that's got a record and a book? Like, oh, this is great. Now ECW had done books in the past with Neil Peart, the guy from
Hmm.
Rush. So, yet again, I find myself riding on Rush's coattails, career wise. The fact that they'd had a fair amount of success, uh, I think that makes them sort of more amenable to the fact here's Rik Emmett, uh, pitching his own stuff. Anyhow, so yes, so 10 Telecaster Tales has come out. At the end of the year, there's going to be another poetry book called Leaning Into It, which will come out, which is a book I'd written sort of during COVID times. So that's what's going on. And I think I'll keep writing, buddy. I mean, I think I'll keep, whatever it is. It's what I do. It's at the heart of, one of the things that I enjoyed when I was teaching college for a couple of decades was
Hmm. At Humber College, correct?
thank you. Yes. Yeah. Being on committees where you'd write curriculum and you'd be coming up with pedagogical kinds of things, and maybe, hey, we're going to write a textbook, and a couple of the teachers are talking about, collaborating on stuff. Like, I just like writing. It doesn't matter what it is. I enjoy the process.
Wow. Okay. So it's wonderful to see that you've evolved, that there's more projects coming. But one thing that has my curiosities about 10 Telecaster Tales. So the roots of it has to do with a guitar that you dreamed up. Is there any chance we might get, oh, that it is. Wow.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that you might make a replica of it, a limited edition thing that people could buy?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, there's a company in Canada called Godin out of Montreal, and I've been having conversations with them. I'm waiting on the prototype,
Oh,
and if it works out, then they're going to put up. I would imagine it'll be like custom ordering. People will have to put up their credit card and go, yeah, I'm ordering one, and then they'll build however many they get orders for. But yeah, and it's not going to be exactly like this one because, every time you do one of these, you learn something, and the thing I learned from this one is, okay, I don't think I want to have, the strings running back to the grommets behind. So I'm going to have a different bridge on it, but it'll be essentially the same idea, a 24 3/4 scale length, which is like a Gibson Les Paul, with a couple of humbucking pickups, which is like a Les Paul, and then everything else will be very telly, which that was the whole idea in the first place. So you want to hear a little bit? Can you hear this on?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
There you
The
go.
ending. Yeah, I think it's interesting the career point that you're at where you obviously appease the classic rock audience because they hear the classics and they will continue to buy it in whatever package form. Yet you evolved as being this columnist, this author, the professor, the things that you did with Song Studio related to that, etc. So when I say, what is Rik Emmett? Do you have a clear answer for who you are or what you are at this point? An easy to pin down occupation title?
I think it's easier to be more general and just to say Rik Emmett is a creative entity. He's a guy that just likes creativity. So, before I was talking to you, I was exchanging texts with Janine Leach, who did the cover of the 10 Telecasters book. And I've got a fella named Alan Shoesmith who's helping me with my streaming. I'd never really chased streaming before in any kind of concerted way. And so he's helping me with that. And he said, the stuff that you had, it was called Bonfire Sessions, which I had only sold them as downloads off my website. And he said, well, we're going to stream all those. But the way to organize those, Rik, is we should create 5 packages of them, give them titles, give them like little covers, like little thumbnail, covers for all these things. So I love the process of exchanging email with Janine and going, hey, artwork for this, hey, let's call this thing 6-string sketches. And that'll be like a prequel for 10 Telecaster Tales. We'll have this. So I just enjoy creative conversations and where things are leading. And, I exchanged email this morning with an old student of mine, David Gaskin, who's got a blog going and he's teaching a songwriting thing out in British Columbia. And I was exchanging an email with my friend Denton Young, who I played in a band called Act 3 before I was in Triumph. And Denton and he was talking about songwriting. And I was saying, okay, well, I taught songwriting for 20 years. So, let me give you a couple of kicks in the ass. And he goes, oh, inspiration. I go, not inspiration, motivation. Inspiration will come from within for you later. So that's kind of how I see myself, that I'm a motivation, inspiration, creation kind of person. And it really doesn't matter what we're talking about. Like, I would love to have a chance to sit down with President Trump and talk to him about creatively how you get along with other nations on the planet Earth, because to me, everything is about creativity and working your way towards solutions.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of my favorite bands, we find out years later, and they never got along, and there was disagreements galore. And one of them is Van Halen. And I promise this is going to relate to you in some form. So us Van Halen fans for decades have been going, oh my God, is there anything in the archives or not? Are we ever going to get it? And then fans in the last few weeks have just been leaking out all these classic things from the late 70s and early 80s to YouTube. And they know you got to grab them because they're going to go away. In the case of Triumph, is there a lot archived? Is there stuff that we could see in the future from the 80s or early 90s?
There isn't a lot, but in another way, there's a ton. So, let me explain. We didn't record, 55 demos and then go into the studio and cut 15 or 16 songs and then choose the 8 or 9 or 10 that were going to be on the record. That's not the way we worked, because we were kind of always up against it because of touring. It was more about going out, and in truth, we were not a band that had a tremendous creative work ethic. You know, I did, but the other guys, their work ethic was more about the band's business and the band's marketing and the relationship with the record company and agents, and Gil loved the idea of production. So but having said that, Gil is a pack rat kind of guy, and he's the one that kind of owns the brand name and stuff, and the owner operator of it. And he's got this bee in his bonnet now about wanting to take out a digital 3D hologram, I don't know, kind of production thing that would be a Triumph tour, where the three of us, the original members, don't necessarily have to, ride in a bus or be in an airplane or, go out on the road. There will be musicians hired to be the core band. There will be, I don't know, just crazy digital kinds of screens and stages that can do things. And so a lot of what Triumph was its productions live. And so Gil kind of wants to keep that flame burning. Now, as part and parcel of that, I said, well, Gil, have you got the old 24 tracks, and are they all digitized? And, will you be able to access the old tracks so that if there was going to be some sort of hologram thing? And he said, like, Rik, do you want to go into a studio and will you wear capture, things stuck to you so that we could maybe use you in a digital skin and make it be like, oh, it's a 25-year-old Rik Emmett, moving around. And I go, yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's have a meeting and we'll talk about that. Maybe, I don't know. So he's got ideas, and he will then plunder, whatever else exists. Now, you're asking me this stuff. There was a documentary that came out, Triumph Rock and Roll Machine.
Yes.
Yeah. And Banger Films did an incredible job with that. And when those guys were doing it, they had gone into the archives and found music that was actually out. So there were some things that were part of the soundtrack where it was like, there was a guitar piece that I recorded one day on a double neck guitar where I did a trick that Neil Sean had showed me, where I had turned up the 12 string really loud. And then on the 6 string, I was playing chords when that wasn't activated. And then I would blow across the 12 strings, and it would be some of the notes you were holding on the 6. It would be some sympathetic thing. It was this really cool, weird thing. And in the newspaper that day, I had seen this performance thing from Japan, these priests that called themselves Sankai Juku. And so on the box of the tape deck, we'd just written Sankai Juku for this weird little piece. And they used it in the documentary. It was in behind. And there was something about it when I was looking at the rough cut, and I said, yeah, there's something really familiar with that music. Where did you source that? And they go, well, that's you. That was an outtake on it. And I go, oh my God. I'm like, wow, So there's some stuff like, there's not a lot. There was another song that I'd written for my grandmother on her birthday called I Believe in Love, and it was really corny. And I sung it and played it one day. And they said, can we use this? And I said, I would rather you didn't. It was a kind of a private thing, and it's not really something that I meant for the public. So that becomes a rub for what you're talking about. Like, I'm sure in the Van Halen camp, there's things where the brother goes, no, that was never intended, Alex.
Oh yeah. There's warts and all would be the nicest way of putting it, because it's not only the live performance, but they're filming them backstage, and not everyone's in the right state of mind for a lot of footage.
And they're California boys, and they were living the life, I mean, we did the US Festival with them, and they were the headliner, and they partied pretty hard throughout the day. So that by the time it came for their show, And I didn't hang around to see it, but I saw footage afterwards and I went, well, maybe not their best moment, you know, because I had seen the band live a couple of times.
Sure.
And they always were able to come out of the gate, you know, like ripping. And Eddie was always pretty much on his game in the earlier days, you know. But, you know.
But
so,
the US Festival is the one gig where they weren't at the top of their game, and that's unfortunately the most documented thing. So
it's weird, isn't it? I mean, you know,
yeah.
as a professional, I kind of go, look, there's going to be 7, 8, 10 cameras going. And of course, we were during the day, so it was going to be broad daylight. Like, Rik, you better have your shit together so that what you do, because this is for the record. This is, you know, whereas the Van Halen guys, they had a lot more, I don't know what you'd call it, cockiness maybe, you know, where it's like, well, I'm a rock star. I'll just do rock star stuff and it'll be cool. It'll be great. And I go, well, maybe that's a California thing. You know, maybe that's more of an American thing than a Canadian thing. You know, I felt like I better be humble about this. I better be modest. I better, you know, have my shit together, you know. So especially as a singer, that was always a thing that pushed me. Like, was I gotta be able to sing really well. Now in Triumph, all I ever had to do was sing half the stuff because Gil would take one, I would take one. So, you know, I didn't have the workload like a guy like David Lee Roth had. He had to sing everything, you know. So, yeah, I don't know. I tended to be, you know, a guy that had my cup of tea, tried to get my 8 to 10 hours of sleep, you know, tried to eat right. You know, I didn't really abuse myself. So, you know, but of course, back in the day, that wasn't a particularly rock star way of behaving.
Yeah,
So,
it worked. Well, I've got two quick questions and then I'll let you go. And the first one is what I'm hearing, putting words in your mouth. You're very creatively fulfilled. You're looking at future projects, you're keeping up relationships, you have ideas. It doesn't sound like, and tell me if I'm wrong, it doesn't sound like you feel like there's anything else you have to accomplish. You're just kind of doing what you want to do for the foreseeable future.
yeah, I mean, I do think, you know, I've been doing a lot of interviews lately. So there's one story that I keep coming back to where I've seen a clip, you know, like most people, I'm addicted to my Instagram feed. And a couple of times I've had this one from David Bowie come up where he's being asked about artistic process. He goes, well, you know, he says, I don't think you should play it safe. I think you got to get out where your feet no longer are touching bottom. And you know, you got to get over so that the water's over your head a little bit. He goes, that's where interesting things happen. That's where good stuff happens. And I agree with that completely. So I do think from in a creative process, from an artistic perspective, you do have to kind of push yourself to places where you're not all that comfortable. And as an example, you know, I retired from the road because just personally, I couldn't handle it. The anxiety, the stress, you know,
Yeah.
the whole thing of, you know, planes, trains, and automobiles and hotel rooms and, you know, the checking in and out and the, you know, standing in line to get on the plane and standing in line to get off the plane and all of that kind of stuff. I was just going, I'm so sick of this. You know, I never want to do this again. However,
However,
you know, the water is a little deep out there when you play. There's a challenge to that. So, you know, I have my guitar here, and every day now I'm trying to put in a couple of hours because I want to go play some live shows again. And I'm going to play 3 in the next month, and I'm going to see how it goes. You know, I'm going to play the 10 Telecaster Tales live. I'm going to just push myself. You know, try something where I'm not going to be comfortable, but you know, I feel like if I can still do it, like I have to take arthritis medication every day,
right.
but if I can make my hands get through the Telecaster Tales 2 nights in a row in a small theater, then I go, well, you know, maybe I should be doing that because I still can. And I think that's a big part of as you get older, you know, your doctor will tell you, look, you should be exercising, you should be, don't let your mind turn into mush. You should be pushing yourself. So all of those kinds of things contribute to the fact that I go, okay, well, I'm going to get uncomfortable. My wife said, let's go to Europe. And I go, okay, so we're going to Paris for, 5 days, and then we're going to go up to Amsterdam, and we're going to get on a river cruise with a bunch of pals, and we're going to go all the way down to Switzerland on the Danube. And, I'm going to spend, a couple of weeks in Europe. And did I mention it? I'm not keen on travel.
Yeah, you don't love the road, the planes, trains, and the automobiles. And
So
now you're putting a boat on that too.
Exactly. Yes, that's right.
Well, the last thing I have for you, and this is not intended to be a rude thing. This is intended to be a Rik Emmett is awesome thing. So there was headlines made within the last 2 weeks when Phil X was on stage next to Richie Sambora about the fact that Phil replaced Richie. Now, you were the original Phil X replacement situation. Can you confirm that when you get in a room with Phil X that it's cordial and there's no awkwardness and everyone loves Canadian icon Phil X?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And in fact, this thing that I was, telling you about with Gil and his crazy scheme, who knows if it will come to fruition or not. I think Phil will be one of the guys in that band. Awesome. Because he can drive that bus. Like he's got everything it takes to be a rock star. And look, when it all went down, I did a guitar seminar thing here in Canada with him. And the guy that was running it, Jim Morris, said, are you going to be okay with this? Like, this is the guy that replaced you. I go, look, man, I have no problem at all. And when I saw him, that was the first time I'd seen him after it all, I'd left and he'd come in. And I walked up and I shook his hand and, kind of held on to it pretty strong for a second. And I said, Phil, there's nobody on the planet Earth that is more with you than me, because no one else has ever been in your shoes like this. I have. And I know what you're up against. I know what you're in for. I know what it's like to be partnered up with those two guys. And I know it won't be easy. And so, you've got all of my support and all of my, and I mean, in the end, they couldn't really make a go of it, and I don't think it was Phil's fault. I do think that there was a thing about Triumph, the original three guys. At a certain point in the band, I had said, guys, I don't want to go on tour unless we add a fourth guy. I need somebody that can sing harmony vocals in tune, because that was always a little sketchy at Triumph. And I said, and I just need somebody that can fill out the sound more. We need keyboard. That was a very keyboard-oriented time, the mid-'80s. I mean, even Van Halen was doing keyboards,
Totally.
So I said, look, we got to round out the sound more. And so I don't want to go on tour unless we add a fourth guy. And the other two guys, Mike and Gil, they were not keen on it. They did not like the idea. They didn't want to spoil the chemistry. And they might have had a point, because it was the beginning of the end had already started, in that sense. So, but the formula of Triumph, I think, had to have Rik Emmett singing and playing. I think in the end, and it was something that maybe even the other guys in Triumph, Mike and Gil, they didn't really believe it. When I would say to them, I think this is the way, guys, like way back 1979, the Just a Game album, I wrote songs like Lay It on the Line and Hold On. And Hold On in particular, I felt like I've struck something here that is really important. This is, we're called Triumph. And this song is about believing in yourself. And it was a song of, motivation and inspiration long before there was any of that, a section of it in the bookstore, self-help. It was kind of like I was going to those kids out in the seats. Hey, you matter to us. And here's a song that's about that connection. And I felt like, man, I've really touched on something here. And Gil didn't like that song at all. Like, he was not keen on it. And when I'm going, no, I want you to play like a disco thing, 4 on the floor and a chicken, and I'm just going to put a wire choir on this with guitars. And he was like, nah. I don't like this. I don't like having to play this style of drums, you know. So I think it took them a long time. And I think the Phil X thing was a part of their education that they went, huh, this Triumph thing doesn't seem to work without Rik, you know. But I'd had enough of it, you know. There were other things I wanted to do. So I know I went off on a few tangents there, but no, Phil and we're good.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that there's so much more to come from you. Congratulations on getting the book and the soundtrack done. Looking forward to hearing more about those live gigs. Hope we get you in the States. But the bottom line, Rik, thank you for the decades of great art, and fingers crossed for more to come soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're very kind.
Paltrocast.